How the fuck are you Cocksnot Crusaders doing today? It's the Aussie Metalhead here coming at you with another video today. We are going back for episode 2 of classic albums that changed my life. If you haven't seen the original video, I will link to it below. Feel free to check that out if you want to. Let's fucking get into it. Picking up where we left off in the last video, I was sort of at this point where I had done the whole thrash metal and new wave of British heavy metal thing for several years, and I'd really gotten invested in that. I loved it, but I was starting to get into different stuff. I was really starting to develop an interest in different things, and what I discovered a serious interest in was nu metal. From stuff like Korn that I had heard bits and pieces of them, but never really invested in them fully. It's sort of until I'd really sort of transitioned into becoming what you'd call it, like a metalhead. So I was still looking for something when about the time that I found System of a Down. That became the thing that I obsessed with for quite a long time. But then I heard Disturbed. Now, all David Dreidel jokes aside here, Disturbed was a band that was pretty important, I think, in my development into a metalhead. For the course of a good 3-4 months, this was an album that I was very much into. The Sickness, more so than any other subsequent album that Disturbed ever released, really was kind of a landmark album in my perception, because it was very raw, but it was also way more aggressive than I think anything that I'd really delved into at that point. I mean, sure, Korn, plenty more aggressive and very arguably a lot more lyrically aggressive than Disturbed. But I think that at that point, Korn, they weren't sonically grabbing me in that way that I needed. I was, definitely more of in the System of a Down camp. I loved melody, and I didn't get the melodies in Korn at that point. I guess I was just not in that headspace for it. But Disturbed, I found extremely palatable, and I was able to get into it. And I guess it was one of those situations where I was getting one of those initial feelings of listening to something that actually brings out aggressive tendencies in you in a way that is cathartic and can encourage you to if it's something unhealthy like punching the fuck out of a wall or something, or if it's something more positive like writing your own lyrics or going for a long fucking walk until your feet are blistered to shit, just figuring shit out. And that's kind of what this album was for me. I figured some stuff out. I figured out what I was really into, I guess, in that sense. Or I had a sense of what I could be into. I knew that I was into the heavy shit at that point when I felt disappointed when the heavier segments, the breakdowns, the traditionally, this is the part where Disturbed are going to do a heavy bit. Those were the bits I was drawn to before I knew what real heaviness really fucking was. And I think that was the sign to me. I think that we all have that. We hear these songs at this younger age where they have a bit of aggression to it, like a bit of rawness, a bit of something that you could tell was really powerful and cathartic, but you didn't really understand that that was exactly what you needed at that time until you fucking hear it. So I think that upon hearing songs like Down with the Sickness and Violence Fetish in particular, Dropping Plates as well, were songs where I sort of started to realize, okay, like I'm pissed off all the time. I don't really know why I'm pissed off, but this isn't just pissing me off to no end. This is bringing out emotions in me that I feel like I'm kind of having to deal with as a result of listening to this music, which I think is healthy for anybody to experience something that makes them reevaluate themselves and sort of get themselves back in a better direction, as it were. So yeah, Disturbed were pretty integral developmental band for me in terms of getting into much heavier shit. So for that right, I mean, gonna come out and say, not a Disturbed fan at all. I remember the Sickness fondly, but I don't enjoy anything that they've really released subsequent to that. I think I liked one song, I think Liberate, which I think was off their second album, Believe, I think it is. Feel free to correct me in the comments there if I'm wrong about that. I'm not really much of a Disturbed expert. But for these reasons, I think that Disturbed were a pretty integral developmental band for me in finding the heavier shit. Heaviness that could be reflected in the band that we're going to speak about next. So itchy! Yeah, you guys are probably going to fucking call me a pleb and a fucking dork and all that sort of shit for this decision, but fuck y'all, because it is honest and true that Slipknot were that fucking band. They were that gateway band for me. that made me realise, yeah, metal is well and truly for me. By that point, I was just sort of listening to it based on, oh yeah, these are good tunes. Slipknot was the band that made me take a look at myself and go, you know what, I want to know what metal culture is. I want to understand what it's like to be a part of this demographic, and as a result of that, you know, grew my fucking hair out, got myself as many band t-shirts as I could, started collecting CDs, and like the rest is honestly kind of history from there, because after Slipknot, that's when the floodgates opened for me. I kind of realised that I'd never really taken much of an interest in anything else outside of the little comfort zone that I'd made for myself in terms of new wave and thrash metal. So I decided, fuck it, this is the point where I'm literally going to give everything a shot. This is where I'm going to really push myself and try to uncover as much as I possibly fucking can, because I realised how much time I'd been wasting. You know, if I had more of an open mind and tried this sort of stuff out when I was younger, I could have been listening to this shit for so much longer, who fucking knows. But I feel like it all comes down to timing, and I think that it was just the right time. I was in that right headspace at the time, and you know, all the teenage angst bullshit definitely was, you know, a part of the whole, you know, oh yeah, I want to listen to dark, edgy fucking music, whatever. But I'm well into my 20s now, and I'm still cranking this shit. I still fucking love it. It doesn't just remind me of who I was back then and how far I've come, but I also just think that these albums, their first 2 fucking albums, man, they just hold up so goddamn well. They're still absolute fucking anthems to me. For me, the song that I will go to, I think, for the rest of my life, if I'm so fucking angry, it's either listen to this or fight somebody. It's gonna be Disaster Piece, man, because that is just, for me, that's my fucking zone, that's my kind of fucking music, that's my kind of fucking metal, and I fucking love it, dude. Slipknot, still to this day, probably my favourite band, as probably can be guessed by the artwork from the Grey Chapter, because even though that's an album for another day, Grey Chapter was an album that I personally really fucking enjoyed. I thought it was fucking sick, regardless of what critics say. So yeah, Slipknot, definitely still an absolute favourite of mine. I still fucking love them. Would go see them live when they decide to fucking come here next. If ever they decide to fucking come here next, Jesus Christ. But until then, I can safely say that this album fully deserves to be in the classic albums that changed my life, and I am very much still a fucking Slipknot fan. This will be the last album we talk about today, guys, but this is such a fucking important album to me, man. I'm gonna try and keep this as concise as I possibly can. I don't want to go on too many fucking tangents here, because when it comes to Faith No More, I could talk all fucking day. I could do an entire hour-long fucking video easily on Faith No More alone, because easily one of my favourite bands. Mike Patton, just my absolute fucking idol when it comes to vocalists, and he's just one of my favourite creatives in the fucking world. For me, he's up there with people like Chino and Devin Townsend. He's just an absolute fucking legend. He's so eclectic, and he can literally do anything. I believe he's the most diverse frontman on the planet. I think that his voice and personality lends itself to so many different fucking styles that it's just insane. I've been listening to Faith No More pretty much since I can fucking remember. It's been a band that my dad personally is just an absolute manic fucking fan, and a lot of that bled over to me as a kid, the same with Iron Maiden and whatnot. But in the case of Faith No More, it was Angel Dust that was the album that just completely blew my fucking mind, and I still have not heard an album like it. I've never listened to an album that's made me feel like Angel Dust has made me feel. I think it's one of the most eclectic, unique, diverse, interesting, completely bucking of any formula or trend. This is an album where everything works, and it is just a direct result from having such a diverse and in some ways incongruous lineup of members who all come from very different fields and backgrounds. You had a metal guitarist, you had a primarily hip-hop drummer, R&B hip-hop, and then you had a jazz-funk bass player. Combine this with keyboards and Mike fucking Patton serenading over all of this, you just had an absolutely chaotic and insane mix. That's, whilst what I've just described may not sound like it could possibly fucking work, those of you who haven't heard Faith No More before, it fucking works, man. It's incredible. They can go from really kind of shoegaze sounding dream pop into strong metallic influences, thrashy elements. Mike Patton can go from these incredibly impressive falsetto highs to his own very unique vocal style that I guess maybe the closest person that I could ever kind of put on the line with Mike Patton would maybe be Serge Tankian. I mean, I know that they're both totally different vocalists, but they both have a style, a brand of vocal style that no one else can fucking replicate. It's solely their own, and Mike Patton's definitely worked these to his strengths. His range is absolutely incredible. His highs and then going into crazy, almost death guttural levels. I mean, it's not death metal, but there's his fucking screams in here, man. Especially on the track Malpractice. If you haven't heard Malpractice, if you're a hardcore metalhead, man, then yeah, check out Malpractice, because I think that that's a really good indicator of whether or not you're going to like Faith No More. I'm really not exaggerating when I say that I could talk about Faith No More for fucking ever. I've been listening to them since before I can fucking remember, and I've continued to listen to them. Angel Dust being just a crowning jewel. It's easily in my top 3 favorite albums of all time. It's incredible, and I can't recommend that you listen to that album enough, man. They're a very successful band, and they're very successful in the metal scene. Like I've noticed, Faith No More band. They're very similar to bands like Tool or Primus, where they're not necessarily a metal band, but they have found so much of a fandom within the metal demographic, which I think is really fucking cool. It says a lot about metalheads being pretty open-minded and into things outside of metal. Yeah, I can't fucking recommend Faith No More's Angel Dust enough, and it definitely belongs on my classic albums that changed my life. Once again, that's all for fucking today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the continuation of this series. I would like to make an episode 3, but I've got to kind of think of some more fucking albums first. And as usual, I'll have another album review coming out probably the end of next week. But until that one, guys, stay sick.